This is The Focus Group with business insiders Tim Bennett and John Nash.
I fought worse monsters than you for years in Hollywood. I know how to win the hard way.
We're all business, except when we're not.
Don't f with me, fellas! This ain't my first time at the rodeo.
Taking a train.
I know, can you imagine? Hey, welcome to The Focus Group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host John Nash, where we take an entertaining look at the world of business. We're all business, except when we're not. Be sure to go to focusgroupradio.com to find the platforms that we're on. We're live now, of course, on Facebook if you're watching us, or YouTube, which is also branded Focus Group Radio, or you could catch the audio feed on Saturdays that we release early on Saturday mornings. And the best thing to do is to go to focusgroupradio.com because all of the platforms are there. There's too many to mention, and I don't remember them all.
But I like the line that you said like last week. You respectfully ask, you have a requirement, a respectful requirement.
Respectful requirement that you subscribe, like and rate us on your platform of choice. Well, because that's how so many things are measured that way. Yep. John and I had just, if you were wondering where we were just doing an interview for a company and talking about digital media and talking about marketing as it is in this day and age. And it really does revolve around a lot of this engagement, which you and I would argue awareness is still what's relevant, but
it's always been relevant. They package it with different names, and you and I have been around this wheel so long. We're like, wasn't that direct mail 10 years ago?
So who do we have on the show today, Mr. Nash?
Okay, we're going to be joined later in the hour by Dr. Annie McKee. And she's the author of that book over there that Tim has called, and you know, it's like, I realize the cover is the reason.
How to be happy at work, and of course the color, electric yellow.
Yeah, and it's the yellow smiley face. Yeah. That's what, and yeah, she has a new book out. She
went to Penn, so you know, she and Donald Trump have something in common.
So yeah, she's going to be talking about how to be happy at work, the power of purpose, hope, and friendship. Interesting book. And as a matter of fact, once we're finished with our interview with Annie, our shop talk topic, Tim had a couple to choose from. I sent him 2 or 3, and he said, and Tim's always good at this. He says, I think it's this one to match the topic of the interview.
Right, which is don't follow your passion. 4 reasons why making a business out of something you love can be a mistake or is a mistake. And, you know, there are a couple things in this book that, well, we'll talk to her when she gets here, but I scratch my head on. I'll see whether you and I ferreted out the same questions.
I have lots of notes for the book, yeah. So we hope everybody had a great Labor Day weekend, last official week of summer. The weather here on the Eastern Seaboard was pretty perfect, except for a couple of, well, for you down at the shore, you had a couple of bad days.
In Delaware, but it was beautiful, but I think people have a false sense of fall.
Oh, no, fall's not here yet. We're going to get...
But there's, you know, there was sweatshirt weather, and I love wearing sweatshirt and shorts and flip-flops. I don't know why. I kind of like
casual, it's relaxed,
like that shtick.
Yeah.
But I was down in Rehoboth, and I lost at skee ball twice. We had skee ball tournament. But I did win at the throw the ball at the Koopy Doll. So my friend Brian.
Are they stacked up as a pyramid?
Right.
You're knocking.
No,
down?
they're across in a line, and you have to throw the baseballs, and you only have 20 seconds.
Oh, that's not. So I don't remember 20-second.
Yeah,
rule.
you got to be quick. So
Brian want to keep their toys. They don't want to give away anything.
So Brian from AdMark 360 came down, and he won the first round of softball or baseball. And Richard won skee ball, and then the second round. Well, actually, Brian might have won both.
Really?
And then the second round, Matt came down, and Matt won basketball. We did the basketball hoops.
Is this going to be open when we're down?
Yeah, it'll be open. The thing we do is we spend $15 to $20, and you get these little tickets. You know, so for 1,000 tickets, you get an eraser, like a SpongeBob SquarePants eraser.
What are the tickets worth?
2
cents, 5
like 10
cents?
cents or something. Okay. But you know, so these little kids are there. So we always find a little kid. Because we'll
tickets too.
What are we going to do? We're going to get a pencil. I mean, you're going to do something. So we always find a kid. And Brian had this fit. We must have had 500 tickets. And a little girl was there, and Brian goes up to the dad and says, hey, we want to give you these tickets. The little girl had like 3 tickets. And her eyes opened up like she couldn't believe it. And the father's like, really? Brian said, yeah. And so the little girl is so excited. The father says, hug that man. You know? But it's the best 10 to $20 you can spend. We have a great time in the arcade, and then we take the tickets and give them to the little kids.
I think that's the greatest thing because they're kids.
And you imagine if you were a little kid and you're trying to, you're trying to get the tickets, and then you take your 500 tickets, and then you realize you can get some stuffed fish.
Which you don't need. You don't need a stuffed fish.
But it's just so it was always it's always a fun time down there.
We had a quiet weekend upstate. Did some great bike riding. I got best laid plans of mice and men are sure. What was that line? Surely doomed to fail. So I had this big grand plan for the week we were off for Labor Day, and I was going to go to the house. I was going to do cycling every day. I was going to do my animation projects, catch up, get ready to submit my last assignments. I got walloped, and I swear I got it from a hot dog at Costco.
You didn't get it from a hot dog at Costco.
Well, I was there, and I was.
Think you got? So what did you get? A fever or a cold?
No fever, but a super bad cold. I mean, and you could feel it coming on when suddenly the back of your throat hurts, and then your nose starts going crazy.
So no more Costco hot dogs for you?
No, I just think I'm going to bring antibacterial.
Guys use gloves, right?
He did, but I'm sure the table I sat at wasn't exactly, hosed down and sanitized. I'm just saying, if I go back 48 hours, it seems to be the Costco zone.
It couldn't have been anything you touched on the subway in New York.
New York,
City,
right? Like
right?
the filthy
New York
city.
is so clean.
So I got walloped with this cold, and it turned out to be over a day or two, and it was kind of misty and gray. It didn't rain, but it was like not great days for bike riding anyway. So I caught up on some movies and stuff. And then when I got better, the day like Thursday came, and you know how this happens with a bad cold. If anybody's had this experience, every hour that the day progressed, I started feeling better and better and better and better.
You have chicken soup?
I had chicken soup. I had tomato soup. It's another one of my favorites. And I was, you know how Ricola, when you're sick, the Ricola cough drops are the best thing in the world. And then when you're not sick, you're like, ooh, Ricola.
No, it's not
It's
like
just one of those funny things.
What? So you did an interview at Cheddar TV, which I watched, which was good. But I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
Did you put makeup on?
No. And you're asking a smart question.
I'm asking it why because I'm looking at us here and it looks like we're shiny. I don't know if that's because I'm sweaty.
No. Okay, so 2 shows ago, the week before the week of Labor Day, after we did our broadcast, we had a meeting downtown with a new client, and then Tim had to go back to Philly, and I agreed to do a PR bit of appearing on they call it the CNBC for Millennials, Cheddar TV. So they're down at the New York Stock Exchange. And I was going to be speaking on a report that came out that talked about how people in their mid-30s are dissatisfied with their jobs. Now, the same day a report came out that said a lot of millennials are dissatisfied. I don't blame them. And when you're 25, who wants to work? But so...
They all majored in sociology, which is a ticket to the unemployment line.
Which is, majoring in sociology is basically like Facebook 101, right? I know how to like. Okay. So I go down to the New York Stock Exchange. You have to go in through security. They were closing the exchange. I was the last person through that particular entrance. A producer comes out with one of these headsets, and I'm wearing a shirt that was for our meeting, and it had a lot of...
Many patterns?
And the guy goes, I said, in our studio, this shirt gives people epileptic seizures. So he looks at me, he goes, you don't happen? I said, yeah, I have 2 other shirts. He goes, oh my God, could you change? So I go into the bathroom, put on a blue shirt, then I'm on the floor of the exchange, and there's a whole kerfuffle about this because I was wearing dress jeans. Remember this, the jean thing?
Not a lot of jeans on the floor.
Not allowed to have jeans on it, but the dress jeans were okay. I guess there's a price point for a pair of jeans. So these are from G-Star, these jeans.
With millennial TV, I would think it would be a little more
So you walk on, and I told you about the Carvel cakes?
Yeah.
Okay, so they basically, to get the view of the stock exchange behind you, they're facing a wall. It's like a corner, and there were 3 cameras, 2 teleprompters, and they had a bunch of lights, and they had these gels. And guys, I don't know if you know, they had these like yellow gels on the lights.
It's like RuPaul uses.
And it made me look like I had a tan. I'm Casper the Friendly Ghost, so if I look like I'm on Cheddar TV with a tan, they had some good gels going, and I look clean and fresh. So the guy that was on before me was the CEO of Carvel, and he brought 5 ice cream cakes, and they're all sitting there. And you know how I love an ice cream.
Fudgy the Whale.
Fudgy the Whale was there. There's a bunch of other things. So I said to one of the associate producers, I said, boy, I'd love to dig into one of these cakes. And he goes, maybe not. And if I looked through the window, there were bite marks.
Ew.
And I saw the segment that the Carvel guy was on. The host held up the whole cake and bit the corner of the cake. So I get on, and the guy says, your camera's over here, and I'm staring at the camera, and suddenly they're on. And we're talking about and with us is John Nash. I didn't realize I was on camera. I looked like a deer in headlight. Like, I did look dead. You didn't tell me. I did look dead at the beginning. Then I livened up and I smiled and they started talking about an article that I hadn't been really prepped for, but I was able to answer the questions, and I think it was 5 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. And then the interview wraps up, and they're like, thanks for coming down. You were perfect. I'm like, okay. Then I hopped in the train and went back. So,
well, good.
Better TV.
See, the website hits went through the roof. So what caught your eye this week?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
Mine's a little simple, caught my eye, and it's a visual one. And it goes to around the time of the Charlottesville protest and all the horrible stuff around Charlottesville and the statues and the protesters and the neo-Nazis and everything. Jake Tapper on CNN actually tweeted out a picture of Superman that came from a DC comic that was about 1949 or 1950. And the amazing thing about the comic, or what this poster is, it's basically Superman schooling a bunch of school kids on what it means to be un-American. And you're un-American if you don't treat somebody who's of a different religion or nationality as, once they're here, they're Americans. And Superman's saying, hey kids, remember, boys and girls, your school, like our country, is made up of Americans of many different races, religions, and national origins. 1949, right? We have to be reminded of this.
Yep.
And it says, if you hear anybody talk against a schoolmate or anyone else because of this religion, race, or national origin, don't wait. Tell them that kind of talk is un-American. So they went to DC Comics and they said, where did this come from? And it turns out that only a tiny number of, they reproduced this for social media, but only a tiny number of posters actually still exist. And the original was done. Do you remember all right, so this is going to take us back to last century, but did you cover your textbooks? Did you take brown paper and you made a book cover?
Their paper bag, or use the comics.
Yeah, exactly.
The paper bag lasts longer. The comics were too thin.
Yeah, you're right. The brown paper bag. All right, so back in 1949, the Institute for American Democracy, now known as the Anti-Defamation League, commissioned that poster to be a book cover, and they would hand those out at stores for kids to wrap their books with. Later on, the book jacket became a book poster, and there you go. And it's a public service thing. And I always say, if Superman is doing he embodies. He's the perfect American hero. He embodies everything we love.
The government, I will say this, the government and corporate America is part of the problem with this whole issue about nationality and gender and all the other issues and race, because we still, when you fill something out, you got to check, are you white, are you black, are you Native American, are you Hispanic, Latino? Yeah. They don't do that in other places, other countries. If I have somebody from someone in France, they'll say, I'm French. You ask an American who they are, it's like, well, I'm Irish and German, or I'm Russian and Polish. Yep. Nobody says, I'm an American. And we even on any application, anytime we fill anything out, we're constantly put into these race boxes.
Silos.
And I think it's a problem. I think it's a problem. I think you're either an American or you're not.
But I'll conclude this story by saying that poster perfectly epitomizes my civics lessons, the civic lesson I got from my grandfather, my mom's dad. He used to always say to me, John, when you're in your home and when you're with your friends and family, who you worship, what you do is your own business. But when you meet in town square to talk about town or country business, you're an American. Yep. It's plain and simple. And there's no I, it's all we. We are going to do this. It's not you're going to do that, I'm going to do this. Excuse me. Wow. Simple lesson seems to be lost nowadays.
Well, it's lost. Maybe they should do that commercial again, or that poster again.
The book wrap.
Makes sense. So I had two quick ones. One of them was I just saw this and it made me. First of all, I didn't know the kids were still doing ecstasy. So, and John and Garrett, not that you do, but in our booth we've got John and Garrett, our producers here. Do people still do the ecstasy drugs?
They still do the ecstasy drugs.
It's more Molly, though.
Well, that's what I thought.
I thought it had morphed. Yeah.
But this was Europe. So it said the headline was thousands of Trump-shaped ecstasy tablets were seized in Germany. So the guy was 51 years old, and his son had headed off.
Oh my God, bags and bags of that
Went
stuff.
from Germany to the Netherlands, and they bought these Donald Trump-shaped ecstasy tabs. And
They're orange.
Right. And they had a street value of about 40,000 euros. And so they were hightailing it back from the Netherlands, and they got stopped in Austria. And so the Austrian police pulled them over and asked them what they were doing. They said they'd gone to the Netherlands to buy a car, but they didn't succeed. So after the cops poked around a little bit and sensed something was up, they found over 5,000 of these orange Trump-shaped ecstasy tablets with a large quantity of cash.
Guys, that's like supply for the Electric Daisy Carnival.
Right. So the father and son are still in custody. This was Saturday. The car was seized and towed away.
Of course it was, yeah.
And then the other one that I saw was if anybody went to any college campus around the country, or I would say a lot of towns, Domino's Pizza is prevalent. Did you ever do Domino's?
Yeah, sure we did. Who didn't love the Domino's pie? You know,
But I would always try to do a local one because I thought Domino's was kind of eh. But anyway, Domino's is working with FOMOCO. You might know it as Ford Motor Company.
FOMOCO.
FOMOCO is what we called it in the industry. FOMOCO.
Okay.
But anyway, they're working with Ford to develop these specially equipped Ford Fusion cars, sedans, that are driverless that will deliver pizza to your house. So they're trying it out in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And they're working with the group from University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And so what happens is when you order your Domino's pizza, this driverless car will come. But what they've done is they've tinted out the windows because they're still not really sure that on public roads or if there's inclement weather, that just letting this car go on its own is going to be okay into the public streets. So there is actually an engineer and a driver in the back that you can't see.
Oh, I was going to ask you, I was going to say, if they tinted them, did they not want us to know that there's no one driving? But no, it's to hide the fact that there are people in the car.
And they also wanted, what they really want to check out, they said Ford is, they're expecting by 2020 thousands of driverless cars to be available for all kinds of delivery. What Domino's is testing, they've already confirmed that the technology is here, it's coming, the driverless car is coming. Do you know what they're most concerned about, Domino's? Is whether the car should pull to the side of the street, whether it should pull into your driveway, because you have to go out and get the pizza. So you walk out to the car, and it's like an ATM. You push a button, the window goes down, and there's a pizza oven in there. You take your pizza out.
Okay, so they have to make a decision from a programming point of view if the car is going to stop a certain way.
Right, and whether you're going to come out if it's inclement weather, you're in your pajamas. Do you want to go outside to get your food delivery, or do you still want somebody to bring it to your door?
The last mile.
So what they're doing is they're saying, so the trade-off here is if you don't choose a driver, you don't have to tip. So they're saying, are people going to say...
the absence of the tip means you have to go out to the car.
You have to go out to the car and get your pizza. And so then they're trying to test this out to see. And they said so far, Domino's is also testing out drones in New Zealand because there's not as much traffic, and they're delivering pizzas on drones as well to people.
This just feels like a lot of technology for something that doesn't need it. Pizza delivery was one of the simplest propositions on planet Earth. A young kid stuck a sign on the top of the car, right?
Yeah.
Needs a job, oh God.
Well, that's the thing I think about a lot of this. You know, a lot of these driverless cars are coming for taxis and everything else, right? So it's like the supermarkets that don't have a cashier.
Yeah.
The self-serve supermarkets is taking away automation.
And they never, by the way, in the throes of my head cold, I went to the local store to buy. It's amazing how much tissue you go through when you're sick. How does the body do this? Anyway, I went to I was buying 3 boxes of Kleenex, a thing of Ricola, and some green tea. Of course, the machine locks up. Beep, beep, and it happens when you don't put that item on the side.
You got to weigh it.
Immediately got to go down.
If it's light enough, it still doesn't work. I hate self-serve. I'll wait for the checkout
girl, yeah.
So business birthday.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
And don't you forget that we are still the only show in the universe that does business birthdays. Born today, September 6th in 1888, was Joseph Patrick Joe Kennedy Sr.
Okay. I saw the picture. And the patriarch.
The patriarch of the Kennedy clan. He died in 1969. He had a severe stroke and in the mid-'60s, and then finally succumbed to death at 81 years old. He was an American businessman, investor, politician known for his high-profile positions in U.S. politics. He married Countess Rose Kennedy. I didn't know she was a countess.
Again, Business Birthday shows us, like we learned before, that Warren Buffett lived above the garage with his wife's best friend, the girlfriend. Countess?
Well, she was a count. The Pope made her a countess. The Pope can do it.
Okay.
You know, the Kennedys kind of did for the Catholic Church what Tom Cruise did for Scientology. I mean, the Kennedys are, you know.
This is a Catholic family.
Yeah. So,
That's
of course, we all know President, Robert Kennedy and JFK and Teddy Kennedy. But Joe Kennedy also served, he was appointed by President Roosevelt to be the first chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the Maritime Commission. He was also ambassador to the UK for only 2 years. That didn't go over well because he felt that appeasement, and he actually said he was more. He was more weary of Jews than he was of Hitler. Can you imagine that being your quote?
He says this?
Said that, yeah. And he thought America was approaching Armageddon, and he believed that Roosevelt, Churchill, and the Jews and their allies would manipulate America into a war.
And Roosevelt gave him the ambassadorship?
Well, he made him resign after he said that. And but he also he employed a lot of no longer legal tactics on Wall Street during the stock market crash, made a great deal of money during the Great Depression. He also worked with RKO Studios.
Yep,
He took Hollywood studios and merged them. The other thing, which everybody probably knows about, is during Prohibition, he gained a reputation as an importer of illegal liquor. Mm-hmm. And after Prohibition, he and Roosevelt's son went to Scotland, and I didn't know this. He negotiated all the contracts, exclusive contracts for Scotch whiskey for Gordon's Gin and Dewar's Scotch was all Kennedy-owned contracts.
Oh, my God. And how long were I guess that's...
I don't know. They probably still are. You know, Teddy always loved the Scotch. It was always the Glass Kingling. Also had the rights for Canada as well. They also owned the largest office building in the country, Chicago's Merchandise Mart, which gave the family a foothold in Chicago. Their daughter, Rosemary, people talk about this. The daughter, Rose Kennedy, their daughter, Rosemary, was being born, and the doctor didn't get there in time, so the nurse had held Rose Kennedy's legs together so the baby would not come out of the birth canal, and ended up not allowing oxygen to get. There was some brain damage to the child. So unfortunately, that wasn't going to fit with the mode of the Kennedys. So the father decided to get a lobotomy for the daughter, which totally ruined her and her speech and walking. It was a very sad story.
But you know, that was the prescribed treatment of the day.
It was, but you find out when you read deeper into it that the person they used really had no training.
Okay, all right.
And it when you hear about the procedure,
it's a horrible,
and what they did, it was just
horrible
disgusting.
procedure. Yeah.
But happy birthday, Joe Kennedy.
On that note, happy birthday, Joe Kennedy.
Yeah, so hey, we want to, as many of you know, one of our partners here on the Focus Group is Deep Discount. And thank you to our latest listener who sent us. I don't know if you saw that.
I love the movies she bought. She bought 5. Like she bought 2 different Thank You Deep Discount sets, and she said that the movies were for her and her daughter.
Yep.
So you had like young kid, you know.
And she specifically had one sci-fi, and she said that was for a gift because I know how much you hate sci-fi. When she directed it to me.
It was Genesis 2 or something. She was giving it to a sci-fi friend. Yeah.
So they've been a very loyal supporter of us here on the Focus Group, and right now this month's focus is on the Criterion Collection. There's over 1,200 DVDs and Blu-ray titles on sale. These are the best versions of the films at the best prices. Anyone who knows Criterion knows that hands down it probably is one of the best, if not the best, distributor of a lot of these great movies, and they have a lot of behind-the-scenes information and director's cuts that you wouldn't find normally. And John made the good habit of finding us 3 films that he thinks everybody should pay attention to. So what are they?
And thankfully Tim agreed.
Did agree.
Tim saw the 3 picks, and he's like, "Okay, you're in, you're golden." On the very front page of the Criterion thing, one of the first movies I would highly recommend if you haven't seen it, it was the movie that I believe Joan Crawford won an Oscar for this. Oh, did she? Yeah, she did win an Oscar for Mildred Pierce.
Yes.
It's Mildred Pierce from 1945. So it's gotten the Criterion treatment. It's a 4K digital restoration. There's a bunch of interviews. There's some excerpts of interviews with Joan Crawford. But the movie itself is a really well-done movie, black and white, film noir.
Classic.
movie. I mean, it should be in your library. So I highly recommend the Mildred Pierce. The second one, another one that I think everybody has to see, especially if you're in the LGBT community. I don't know why. Well, actually, I do know why. What am I saying? Valley of the Dolls. Featuring Patty Duke. I mean, this is the movie that was supposed to make Patty Duke not some kind of Disney,
One of Richard's favorite movies, I fell asleep.
No.
Yeah. But I know everybody loves it. It's a cult classic.
You fell asleep during this
I love the
movie?
scene where they rip her wig off and they flush it
It's
down
a
the toilet.
wig, yeah.
But I don't know why. For whatever reason, it might have been the day. I'd not seen Valley of the Dolls. He's like,
Probably
you have to
don't
watch
go
it.
for booze and pills, Neely.
Yeah, I need to watch it. I
man.
need to watch it with you and Bob.
Yes, you do. You need to come up to the house and watch it with us like you watch Greg Arnold.
Popcorn, right.
And our last movie, another incredible movie that I adore, Peter Sellers, George C. Scott, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Love the Bomb. Seeing it in with the Criterion treatment is a real treat because Peter Sellers plays like 4 different roles in the movie. George C. Scott plays the general. Peter Sellers plays a president, an army guy. Like he plays all these roles. It's a really dark humor, but fun movie. I would say you could buy 3 of them, you're all set, or buy any one of them, you're all set, right?
And there's always a new release, and this week's release is Rebecca, which is a 1940s psychological drama directed by Alfred Hitchcock. And I believe the 3 actors in it were all up for Academy Awards.
Yes, they were.
And it actually did win 2 Academy Awards for Best Picture and Cinematography. And did you watch Rebecca?
Yeah, it's not my favorite Hitchcock, but it's a good hit. It's one of Hitchcock's first American films. So one of the things about Criterion, and this is not a Criterion story, but I happened to be watching TMC the other day, and what I love about discs like the Criterion Collection are the behind-the-scenes actors, interviews, director stuff. Michael Caine was being interviewed about his early days in Hollywood and how he was a friend of Cary Grant's.
Really?
Cary Grant's one of my favorite actors, and Michael Caine told this story, and I love this story. He said, Michael Caine was pretty well known at the time for a movie he was in. Cary Grant was in his probably late 60s, early 70s. They're standing in front of a hotel, and this woman walks up to them, and she goes, "Oh my God, it's Michael Caine, it's Michael Caine." And he goes, "Hello, hello." And she looks at the 2 of the guys, and she says, "You never see stars in Hollywood anymore." And Cary Grant goes, "No, you don't." She had no idea it was Cary Grant. I just, "No, you don't." If you know Cary Grant, you know that's the way he would say it, and there you go. Anyway, so definitely check out Deep Discount. Get there by going to focusgroupradio.com. Click on the Deep Discount logo. It's going to take you right to the Criterion Collection. Have fun exploring the titles there because Criterion really does a superb job with the packaging, with the movie, with the whole bit. And we'll finish up the Deep Discount by saying,
thanks, Deep Discount.
Garrett's back from vacation.
Garrett's back.
Energized. Stay with us, folks. We're going to take a quick break to set up for our guest, and it's Dr. Amy McKee, and the book is Annie McKee, and the book is How to Be Happy at Work. We like the color because it harkens back to the
color
smile
goes in my
face.
blue.
The blue, yeah. Is that almost like the green? Is it? Yeah. All right, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Brought to you by Volkswagen. Visit VW.com to learn more. Focus on the savvy side of 9 to 5 with the Focus Group.
Try, really try.
Listen, laugh, and learn with Tim and John.
I never try anything. I just do it.
Hey, welcome back to the Focus Group. It's Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, John Nash. We're all business, except when we're not. The best way to learn more about us is to go to focusgroupradio.com. There's multiple platforms of choice if you want audio or video or both. And all our shows are there, available 24/7. And we're building up quite a library now, I believe, after a number of years. So be sure to check out Focus Group Radio. Joining us right now, as promised, is Annie McKee, who wrote this book, which I love the color of the front of it, How to Be Happy at Work. You've also written a number of other books, or co-authored a number of other books. But Annie is joining us here to talk about how to be happy at work. And before I ask you if you're happy at work, which was my first question, which I thought would be snarky.
Yeah, it's a little snarky.
Are you happy at work? And sometimes.
Sometimes.
So why don't you say hello to the audience, and then we'll we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here. And it's a joy, actually, to talk about being happy at work. And yes, I am happy at work, but I haven't always been. And maybe I'll tell you the story later on.
Oh, we'd like to hear the story.
That's the story you want.
So so for background for our listeners, I know you do an awful lot of work with large corporations and talk a lot about leadership and I don't want to say happiness at work. Does that sound trite, or is that correct?
Yeah, well, I do work with a lot of leaders all over the world, and I hadn't started out intending to study happiness at all. I was studying good leadership practices. I was studying organizational culture. I was trying to figure out what helped people be more effective, right? So I'd be brought in to kind of look at what's going on and how people behaved, and I started to see a pattern. Whether we were in South Africa or the United States or Germany, France, it didn't matter. People were telling us, I want to be happy at work. I want to give my all. I want my work to have meaning. And I'm not happy at work. In fact, I'm miserable.
But happiness is a concept. Friends have often said to me, don't strive to be happy. Happiness happens in between. It's those moments that you catch yourself. You're like, oh, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm happy. It's a very kind of diffuse. Am I right in saying that it's kind of a diffuse goal to say to a workforce or to a management team, you're going to go from A to B to C or to 110% productivity if you can harness the ability to make people happy. So recognizing that you were hearing this in the field, what were your next steps to make that kind of a reality?
It's a good question. Striving to be happy is not going to get you there. But I think there are a lot of things that we can do to move ourselves from miserable to
on the spectrum,
at least neutral, and then to content and fulfilled. I think a lot of people have bought into a myth that you shouldn't be happy at work, that work should be grueling.
That was part of your book, actually, that working beyond the hours you should be working, and that work is by its very nature work, so it should be grueling. That's hard to turn on its head, though, because you're going against a cultural bias, right?
It is a cultural bias, but I think its time has come. We could work 24/7 if we wanted to. We could work weekends, many of us do. We give up vacations. And why are we going to accept that we're going to be unhappy, miserable, unfulfilled for a third of our waking adult lives? I just don't buy it.
It reminds me of I don't know if you remember Joan Rivers. Obviously, you know Joan Rivers. But I remember somebody asked her what she told a joke about. Someone asked if she was happy in her marriage. She goes, I'm happy. I'm not happy. She's like, but, and I think a lot of people probably feel that way about work. And I know in your book you touch on essential elements that people need to have in order to be happy at work. Can you touch on those three things?
Sure. Tim, first of all, we need to feel that we're making a difference. It's human nature to want to have impact on other people or something we care about. Far too often in the workplace, we do our jobs, we do our daily tasks, and we never really know whether we're making a difference or not. So number one, you've got to feel that your work is purposeful, that you're doing something that matters to you.
And that's for everybody then.
That's everybody.
No matter what your position is.
It doesn't matter.
Universal.
It doesn't matter. You can be cleaning houses, you can be a janitor, you can be at McDonald's, you can be a CEO of a company. It doesn't matter. We need to feel that we're having
Actually,
impact.
I'm glad you hit on some of those job titles and some of those categories, because that was something I was wondering about. When my first job was Marshall's, brand names for less. Tim was Walden Books. I think fondly on that job. I don't know if I was happy, but I certainly was surrounded by a bunch of fun people. But it does relate to anybody in any job, whatever, top, bottom, whatever it is. If you're contributing, if you like the organization, you're going to be happy.
It does, and there's actually research coming out of some universities that proves the point. Amy Wisniewski at Yale has studied janitors and a variety of other people in various jobs and found that even if we're in jobs that normally we wouldn't assume give us a sense of fulfillment, we can shift our attitude and see our jobs differently. So instead of thinking of ourselves as waiting tables, that was my first job, or
I've never done that.
oh,
Not that I did.
it's an experience.
I've heard.
I don't think you do well. You chat too much.
I never, yeah. I couldn't turn
you'd
the
have to
table
keep
quick
couldn't turn 'em
enough.
over,
I don't know
right.
how, yeah.
Good in Europe, maybe.
Good smile, though. He'd probably do fine. He'd probably do fine. No, but the point is that if we look at our work and see what we are doing that makes a difference and frame it that way, we can find meaning in work no matter what we're doing. You know, I've met CEOs who aren't fulfilled at all. And I've met people who are in rural South Africa in really difficult working conditions who are deeply fulfilled. It's partly how you look at it.
So there's purpose, and then
Purpose, and I'll skip to what you were talking about a minute ago, friends, relationships.
At work.
At work. I mean, why shouldn't we be friends with people at work? Why not? We spend a third of our lives working. Who wants to hang out with people who don't like us, who are bullying us, who are lying, cheating, stealing? No, we want to be with people we like. We want to feel safe, and we want to feel trusted, and we want to give the same in return.
we had somebody on a couple weeks ago, Kelly McDonald, and but one of her points was, and I don't think you're saying the same thing, but maybe you are. But one of her things was sometimes you do work with people that you might not get along with, and she said you have to figure out your commonality. I don't have to go to dinner with you, but I have to work with you. But you're talking more about is it more of a social thing where you're having lunch with people at work, or you're socializing out of work, or that you feel like you're all working to the same?
You know, it's a
Same
little of
objective.
both. In the workplace, we typically don't get to know each other very well for quite a long time. We've got this boundary, between work and our personal lives. I think that boundary, frankly, ought to be a little bit more permeable. We can bring more of ourselves to work. It doesn't mean you need to go out on vacation together or necessarily even have lunch. You can make friends with people around the work that you're doing, around the goals that you share, just as much as you can about talking about what you did on the weekend.
Tim's being a little disingenuous in the sense
Why?
that you used to have, you ran your department when you were in corporate America, and his staff loved him, especially for Disco Fridays.
Disco Fridays. At 4:30, I had this Bose radio, and we'd come down, and we'd all just kind of let loose for the end of the day on Friday.
I believe they loved it. I know they did. And
Threw a football around. We just
And most of the people that were in Tim's department, if not all of them, still are in touch with you. They're the first person they call when they get a new job. Tim, this happened. So that, to me, that covers the friends thing really well. Not only were you able to manage them, but they could be a friend as well.
I think it's great, and that's what I'm talking about, creating an environment where people can be people,
Right.
where they can be themselves, where they can enjoy themselves, have a little bit of fun, not at anybody's expense, of course, but enjoy themselves, let loose a little bit. Why not? What we learned from neuroscience research is that when we feel good, we're smarter. So if you created an environment in that job, and I know other people who do this as well, you're actually helping people be more successcul.
When
by
you
creating
feel
that
good,
environment.
you're smarter.
You are.
So I hear that, and I take that to mean when I'm in a good mood, when I'm upbeat, when I'm around people that I enjoy, when I feel like I'm contributing, I'm either retaining knowledge to better. Is that where you're
That's
going?
part
with?
of it. That's
and,
part
and
of it.
learning a new skill comes a little bit easier, perhaps.
Yeah,
and
that's
is
part of
that regardless of where you're at in the age spectrum as
It
well?
doesn't matter.
Wow.
It doesn't matter. So let's look at the flip side. Think about a time when you felt threatened or insecure or cynical at work. We've all had these periods of time. Our brains shut down. It's like blinders come down because we're self-protective. We're trying to make sure we stay safe. And we don't learn much when we're like that. And if ever there was a time we need to learn fast and learn well in the workplace, it's now.
when you feel you're not appreciated, right? And that's where I think one of the third point was hope.
That's right.
Which relates to knowing. Is that more of I know where we're going, or that there is something beyond? If I do A, B, and C.
How you're classifying hope there? Is that-
Yeah. I know where we're going.
as an organization.
Well, here's the catch. I know where we're going as an organization, and it's meaningful to me personally. So an organization vision, no matter how good it is usually not enough. What we have to have is a vision of our future at work, whether we're learning skills or advancing in our career, that ties to a vision of our personal future.
So would you call that, does that mean there's a level of personal investment? And when you invest in something, it's a two-way street emotionally, and you have to be getting something. Is that where am I?
Yeah. If you're investing in your dream, you're going to give more than if you're being required to invest in somebody
else's dream. And serving that, if you have no interest in it at all, it makes perfect sense. Hey, we're talking to Dr. Annie McKee, and the book is
How to Be Happy at
Work in yellow. The
I love that
smiley
color,
face yellow. That was chosen on
There you
purpose.
go.
right?
Yes, it was. It absolutely
you are.
was.
You mentioned earlier that you've done a lot of work with senior leadership teams or people around the globe. And one thing that stuck out to me when I was reading about some of the concepts in the book, what happens though if there is poor leadership at the top, or that perhaps the manager that you work with might not be in sync with what your idea of happiness would be? How do you handle that? Because a lot of times we've all encountered the boss that we just probably didn't like, or maybe didn't respect, or didn't, and vice versa, right? So how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's tough to answer, in all honesty, because quite frankly, there are far too many managers in our workplaces who either don't really know what they're doing or don't invest the kind of time and energy that they should in leading, guiding, and managing people. So we can feel adrift, we can feel sort of all on our own, or worse, we can feel that we're under attack. It happens an awful lot. The one thing you don't want to do is give up. The minute you become a victim, you cease to be a leader. And victimhood is not a good place to live in our organization. So you got to really take hold of your strength and your courage and say to yourself, listen, this person has no right to define who I am or to impact my self-esteem negatively. That's step number one. Step number two, look around. Whose world can you influence? Okay, so you've got them above you. We've all had them at one time or another in our lives, and maybe they're not great. But that doesn't mean that we can abdicate our responsibility for creating an environment where we can be a little happier, and so can the people around us.
Now, that's part of that would be in the helplessness category, right?
That's right.
Because I'm going to call you Annie, if that's all right, even
Please.
though you did Dr. Annie.
Dr. Annie.
That's Dr. Annie to you. You earned that title. I'm not a doctor yet. I could play like I'm one, but that's part of your 5 happiness traps.
Yes.
And helplessness.
Yes.
Feeling like you're just, you're out of sync with things. That's a big one. When I was reading parts of the book and going over notes, a thought hit me, and it's something I was talking about with my mom the other day. If we go back to the 50s or 60s or the IBM days of corporate culture, how does someone who's locked into a career and a job, who is on a certain track, and they have responsibilities, aka kids in school or whatever it may be, they're not happy, but there's no way they're going to step off that conveyor belt, because how can they? Is that someone you meet in the field sometimes?
I do. I meet people who actually cannot leave their jobs.
That's the best way to say it.
Yep. And I also meet people who think they can't leave their jobs. But step back for a second. Running away doesn't usually solve anything. What we have to do is start with ourselves and start with what it is we really want in a job, and take a hard look around us and see if maybe we can't find it where we are. You don't have to quit your job to get happy. Now, mind you, there are times when that step might be necessary. But then I would ask the question, those kids who are depending on you and your family, the rest of your friends, how happy are they if you're coming home miserable every night? How happy are they if you're too exhausted?
The ripple effect. Yeah.
Ripple effect.
Have you ever quit a job?
I have. Now, here's the story. I knew we'd get there.
Do tell.
Do tell. No names, protect the innocent. No, I was in the kind of situation you're talking about. I was in a situation with a really toxic boss, and I don't know why the guy hired me. Presumably he saw something in me, but the minute I got there, he tried to sabotage me. I mean, he really, truly didn't either like or respect me. And I was kind of young in my career. I wasn't, I had something to do with it too, because boy, did I make him the devil after a while. I really did. It takes two to tango, right? But this guy was definitely toxic, and I couldn't be my best. I couldn't be at my best. I wasn't as smart as I needed to be, and I, frankly, actually got sick.
Ooh, physical toll.
Physical
toll.
Took a physical toll, and I was in this situation. I had kids. I was sole support of these kids, and I thought I was stuck. And it was a long time ago, but it was probably one of the first experiences that taught me the lesson that how we feel about our workplace and our colleagues and our bosses is really important. And I landed on my feet. End of the story.
Well, obviously. So what's going on in the, John and I both, having done this show and talking to an awful lot of people with experience in the corporate space, what is changing as technology has crept into the, I guess, into the ranks? I was talking to a teacher the other day that says they've now finally given in and allowing kids to have their cell phones in class, and they're taking videos of the teacher and putting it on Snapchat, and I see that going on more and more within corporations. How do we control that sort of thing, or don't we?
The genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah.
The technology that's available to us now, I think, is nothing compared to what's going to be available to us in just a few short years. So a couple of things. I'm sure you've heard the statistics about how many white-collar jobs are starting to disappear because of automation and artificial intelligence. So number one, we've got to get ready to learn. And getting stuck in a job or feeling like we're stuck in a job, guess what? We may not have the choice to be stuck in a job in the future because things are changing so fast. So that's number one. Number two, we carry our work around in our pockets. We could work all the time if we wanted. That's another one of those happiness traps that you read about,
Right.
Overwork. Overwork is a trap. It's not a
insidious.
solution. It's
Insidious
insidious.
because you don't even know you're doing it.
You
It's
don't.
this mouse and cheese thing. If I answer the 5 email now, I bought myself 10 minutes to watch the news. It's
Well, I'm sure on on vacation, people roll over and they grab their phone and start going through.
by the way, you
before
just
they get
said,
out of bed,
I
right?
just love what you said, and I have to use that for the future. You're carrying, these devices. We went to the moon with less computing power.
right.
And now what's in our pocket is just like Dick Tracy level stuff. And you're right, vacation. I now believe a vacation has to be 6 hours out of my time zone.
Yeah.
So if I fly to France, I'm safe. Or Australia or Hawaii,
Yeah.
basically. You got to go
right.
the other way.
And then you wake up to 150 emails.
So what you were just saying about a trend that we know is happening, and many people are beginning to kind of sound the alarm bell about automation, the elimination of a whole swath of managerial level white-collar jobs. How do you take the happiness idea of being satisfied at your job and getting satisfaction from it and get that into that flow of thinking about how we need to be lifelong learners, how adaptive we need to be? Are they simpatico? Are they same thought process?
I think they are. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about it quite that way. But historically, when we're in a managerial role or a white-collar professional job, we're after results. We're hitting targets. We're meeting our objectives, right? I think we need to shift our frame from hitting targets to learning. That learning on an individual and a collective level needs to be the goal, not so much just hitting targets. Now, obviously, if we're in a business, we've got to make profit or we're not going to survive, right? And if we're in a not-for-profit, we've got a mission that we need to carry out. Fine. But the real shift that needs to happen is to see ourselves, first and foremost, as learners, second, as doers.
That kind of runs counter to our quarterly-based obsession, right, with performance.
Hit your numbers.
So a company that kind of just says, you know what, Wall Street, look at our numbers. Internally, our management's focused on our workforce, gaining new skills and knowledge, and you check us out again in 3 quarters. You're gonna, that's a tough thing for senior management to. If they're enlightened, they're trying to juggle quarterly to I have a workforce that I've invested, because that's the other part of this too. If you work for a company and you've been there for a number of years and you're happy or you're satisfied, there's an investment that's been made in you. And I'm sure when you meet with some of your clients around the world, that's what they're thinking about. How do we maximize this investment? How do we keep them happy?
Well, they are thinking about that, and it takes a lot of courage for senior leaders to try to strike a new kind of balance between hitting those targets and creating an environment where there's going to be sustainable success. And I have met a number of really good leaders around the world who do strike that balance, and they've taken a hit. They take a hit when the analysts talk about them. They take a hit from their stakeholders, their shareholders. But in some cases, in all the cases I've been aware of, they have made the point that you can actually do this trade-off and come out ahead because your company is going to be stronger over the long term. You know how many conversations I've been a part of over the years where senior managers, senior leaders, and their boards are entertaining the thought of taking the company private? Those conversations happen.
I wonder about that
You don't
because
have to. You don't have to
you're
answer.
answering to. You can
J.
sit.
Crew model, back and forth, the private, the public.
That's right. That's right.
You're a senior fellow at University of Pennsylvania, so you're doing a lot of work with. Is it through the Wharton School, or is it the chief leadership? Your chief leadership officer?
Yeah,
Doctorate?
yeah. I'm at the Graduate School of Education,
Okay.
and I run an executive doctoral program for people in the middle of their careers. So
Age range for that.
Yeah,
student.
38 to upwards of late 50s.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so they're still working. They come back for a week at a time, and we go through, business content, technology content, learning theories, that sort of thing, research methods, and of course, leadership.
Was this similar to the organizational dynamics?
That's a master's program they run at Penn. That's right. It's sort of similar, but ours is more focused on, I think, people who have more senior roles in the organization.
And the reason I ask is, as you and John were speaking about corporations and the change of habit or change of job, I was wondering if you're doing any work within education, because that's another huge issue in terms
Shifting
of
industry,
So
right?
many people seem to think, well, it's the demise of the liberal arts education, or which I disagree with, but our education system probably is also going to go through a huge transformation. Do you agree, or?
Oh, it has to.
Yeah.
It has to, not only in this country, but around the world. Learning, memorizing facts, rote learning are not a pathway to lifelong learning necessarily. And that's historically been the way we've taught kids, what's expected in universities, and what's expected on the job, too. So, yes, we are doing quite a lot. And there are sort of interest groups cropping up around the country and around the world where we're actually focusing on what do we do to ensure that people can continue learning and stay abreast of the technological and other changes that are already shifting our lives. So I would agree. It's one of the reasons I love being at the Graduate School of Education, because we take that on as well as some of the questions of business.
So that touches on something I'm fascinated by, and it's a phrase that sounds so wonky, and I don't mean it to, but there's such potential for intergenerational sharing. So as an older worker.
You old man, John.
I just finished, I'm 4 days away from completing a 2-year program in character animation.
Really?
And it was a distance learning thing. It was set up by some guys from Pixar. Most of my classmates were probably in their late 20s, early 30s. They'd already started careers and decided to change. I was fascinated by the amount of time that was spent teaching these people, the younger students, about self-presentation, language skills, how to write an email, how one word could, and the fact that they were amazed by this. So as we look at happiness and corporate culture, is there, and your book and all the work you've done, is that an opportunity within a corporation for intergenerational stuff for the older management or older workers? I hate that word.
It's more of a mentorship.
That's probably what I'm. Yeah. Does that exist, and does that help foster that whole culture of being happier at work?
It does. In the best organizations, you've got a culture where age differences are not a barrier to communication, to friendship, to learning from one another. I tell you, I learn as much or more from my 20-something friends and colleagues as I do from my age mates. And so it goes both ways, right? They can teach us a lot wherever we happen to sit on that age spectrum. We can learn a lot from people who are
If you had to quantify that, I agree with you 100%. And I relate to that, and I say it's insight. There's observations they make that I'm not capable of making anymore because of my age, whatever I'm doing. But they say something like, "Have you thought of this?" I'm like, frankly, no. And I don't look at the world that way. And then suddenly you're like, wow, I wish we were around this age bracket more because they're so surprising.
See, isn't that wonderful? And the same thing goes for differences of other sorts, too. Male, female, certainly age, as you're talking about, race, where we come from in the world, the kinds of experiences we've had. Let's stop pretending that those differences don't exist. They do exist. They do exist. And isn't that a beautiful thing?
Yeah.
Have you thought of doing, and maybe you have, a survey? You know, there's always the best. There's
Like
always
a
these
happiness
10.
survey.
Yeah, the happiness survey. Is there such a thing?
Dr. Annie's Happiness
Dr.
Survey.
Annie's Happiness Survey.
That's a really
Brought to you
good
by the
idea.
Focus Group.
R, TMR, registered trademark.
That's a great idea. Now, we're a long way from getting one that my psychologist friends would call valid and reliable.
Well, it's all anecdotal.
That's some survey monkey thing that someone puts up and says,
If I had asked you, what company do you think has a great, or name a couple of companies you think are doing a great job with culture and employee happiness, which relates to the happy consumer, is there one that stands out? Or
There are a couple that stand out in my experience. I've written about some of their employees in the book. Unilever has a fantastic culture.
Fascinating. Okay.
Fantastic culture, and they do that balance between short-term and long-term results really, really well. Sunglass Hut has a fabulous culture.
Surprise number 2. Unilever sunglass? Okay.
Yeah. It's founded on, eyesight is a human right. You make people feel good when they walk in a store. You have fun trying on glasses.
This is unknown to me.
You can read some of the stories in the book here. These are good companies. So some companies really do get it. And they get that the environment their managers create makes a huge difference in people's effectiveness, not just how they feel, but in their effectiveness too.
I always said if you had happy employees, you're going to have happy consumers because it's going to trickle down, right? I mean, that's
Well, especially in some organizations that are so consumer-facing.
Yeah.
The happier the employee, you're going to walk away with a great brand
Feel good.
experience, or you're like, wow, that person they went out of their way to take care of me.
yeah.
Well, Dr. Annie McKee
That's right.
has been our guest. I want to thank you for joining us. The book is How to Be Happy at Work. It's available. We're all fine.
Oh, there it is. Better.
It's even there. Yeah, we're all fine. Books are sold. I think it's a book, and again, what we say about the size of this, right?
Digestible.
It's digestible.
Thank you.
I'm not saying this is probably a New York to maybe Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's NYC to LAX.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
Depends how quick you read.
All right, we want to, Dr. Annie McKee, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a really quick break. When we come back, we have a shop talk kind of in line with what we're talking about, and it's called Don't Follow Your Passions. 4 reasons to not, right? Is that the 4 reasons why making a business out of something you love is a mistake? So we'll be right
Passion
back
doesn't pay
after
the
this
bills,
quick
Nash.
break.
Thank you.
Brought to you by Volkswagen. Visit VW.com to learn more. Now back to the Focus Group with Tim and John.
Because he has a lot of chutzpah.
An entertaining look at the world of business.
Heads are spinning, heads are spinning.
Listen, laugh, and learn.
I am not gay. I never have been gay.
That's my voice.
We need to change our imaging.
No, you don't. We do not need to change that piece of imaging.
That's fine.
I am
No.
not gay.
I am
not
not
gay.
I've been gay. I just
Larry Craig.
So, again, we want to thank Dr. Annie McKee for joining us. We probably could have talked to her for quite a while, but the book, as John said, is very digestible, How to Be Happy at Work. So if you get a chance, it just was released last week. So if you get a chance, pick it up. We're all fine. Books are sold. Our shop talk this week, and John sent me 2 of them, and I thought this one related to our last conversation.
Tim is the master gatekeeper on Shop Talk. Like I read way too much, and so I'll clip all these articles and I'll send the links to Tim. Next day he calls. I said, Tim, what do you think about Shop Talk? I liked them all, but we're going to go with this one.
Well, there can be a debate for this one and an argument for either way. And the title is Don't Follow Your Passion, 4 Reasons Why Making a Business Out of Something You Love is a Mistake. And this was an opinion that somebody had, and they gave 4 reasons why. Say you're very passionate. They use an example. Say you're very passionate about baking desserts and you want to be a baker. And they said it's one thing to say, God, I love baking. I'm going to make a business out of it. But John, you know this, having been an entrepreneur, all of a sudden you're a baker, and then you're an accountant, and you're a procurement person, and you're an HR person, and you're a scheduler, and you're all the other things, and you end up not doing what your passion is that you got involved with. Yeah. But a lot of other people say if you really love what you're doing and you have a passion for what you're doing, you're going to be successful. So I could see where this would go either way, but what was your take on this?
I thought it was a really well done article, and I think actually it's more of a gentle warning to somebody or an individual who does want to follow their passion. Let's say you're a carpenter or a furniture maker, and you're going to open a furniture store. I think that the little prodding was, be aware that when you do this, you're gaining a boatload of new responsibilities. I learned business by default, and I'll say it this way: my first business partner took care of the business. He was the business half, and he was a great salesman and a funny guy, and I was the creative part. And he would trot me in at the right time to sell the creative, and I was trotted out, but I was not necessarily the face of the business. But that changed over time as our ad agency grew. And Tim used to tell me this all the time. He goes, "You're the face of the company.
Yeah.
People are buying the creative."
Buy the creative, that's it. I don't care about the backroom stuff.
I didn't really understand that or come to grasp that until much later. When I had to, when the business changed and our relationship changed, I had to learn a great deal about the business that I never knew before. And once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. It's like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I do think that it's affected my entire career in that I'm always aware of cash flow. I'm always aware of how we present ourselves. It's the whole thing. And the short answer is, I think this is a gentle warning that if you do love something, you might not love it as much if you start it as a business, because you might not be doing it every day, right?
Well, and the other pitfall I think you have is that, is your passion a hobby?
Yeah.
Or is it a business? So if your passion is, if you really love to cook or you love to bake, but beyond that, then it just becomes something you really enjoy doing, or it's a hobby more than it's a passion.
Yep.
Because passion, one of the things is passion doesn't pay the bills. And I was at a cocktail party over the weekend, and somebody asked me what I did, which I always hate that question. Somebody asked me what I did. But anyway, they asked me what I did, and I explained to them about the show. And, I said there's worse ways to make a living, but, who knows? Could all go away tomorrow, and da-da-da. And the guy says to me, "Well, how long have you been doing it?" Because I said, you never know where your next, you and I are constantly looking for new clients and looking for new sponsors. I said, we've been doing it for about 9 years. He goes, "Oh, you're successful." He goes, "If you do something for more than 6 months," and he goes, "and if you're you'll know in 6 months. If you can't pay your bills in 6 months doing your quote unquote passion, then it just is a hobby, or it's just something that you love."
Funny, you're saying 6 months. I was told 5 years. If you can make it
5 years,
if you can make it 5 years.
Really?
Then you're the one that's going to take the business down, not external forces. Hey, look, me and Tim used to be on Sirius Satellite Radio for 7.5 or 8 years.
Yep.
And we get the call one day that the channel that we're on is going away. And, we were always aware that it could happen. And so what do we do? What any professional does. We thank the network for the time and the pleasure of having us be exposed and the privilege of being on their airwaves, and all the great talent we got to work with and meet there. And mostly, to me, the great talent was all the wonderful producers and audio people, everybody that made the show possible. And then now we're here, but that's what I sometimes think people. I say the same thing. It could go away tomorrow. Yeah. I don't think they quite get the nature of media and personality.
Well, what does Heidi Klum say on Project Runway? One day you're in, and next day you're out. Next day you're out.
But I would say that following up on Annie McKee's visit with her book about being happy at work, I think you can probably strike a balance. I mentioned in our last thing, and I've been talking about it ad nauseum, that I'm finishing up my 2-year animation program. I'm not exactly sure, and you've been great about this, I'm not exactly sure that I want to turn it into anything other than an art form that I love, and I'll have fun making stuff. Because the minute you got to make money doing it, it's different, right?
Right, but you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, something may come up and somebody might say, "Hey, John, I need you to work on ABC," and then you do it, and it's something you love, and who knows where it can go. Or you can animate us.
Well, me and Tim have some cartoon characters. You've seen them once before. There was Franny B,
right,
which Tim voices. There's only one Franny in my mind.
How old are those?
Oh my God, they go back to 2000.
17 years ago.
17 years old. And I look at the animation and I'm like, So we're thinking of resurrecting some of them because Tim, if you're at a cocktail party with Tim and he breaks into that voice for the character, everybody knows a hilarious story is on the way. And I just think that we should be giving those away as Looney Tunes to more people.
Well, John and I went out to Hollywood for a big meeting.
I remember this. I remember this meeting.
We were at the Ivy.
Yeah. It was
The guy sits us down and he says, he takes his glasses off. He watches the video clip, watches the cartoon.
Yep.
And then it's just, it's too smart. He said,
your audience
is Boston to D.C.
We're like, no, really?
This needs to sell in Peoria. And we never got beyond the shtick, which is probably, although our biggest audience here is Texas. Hello, Texas.
And we hope Texas is getting over it.
Yeah.
My God, just as a weird factoid, I read this morning that the amount of water dumped that everybody suffered through with Hurricane Harvey literally lowered the crust of the earth in that area by 2 centimeters. Isn't that wild that they could actually measure that the trillions of gallons of water lowered the crust of the earth? That's crazy.
There's something I saw that you would have liked. I was going to put it on our focus group page on Facebook. So somebody did. So there was about 5 feet, 4.5, 5 feet of water that were dumped on Houston. And you can hit your zip code in of where you live and what that would look like
on your own
zip code, where the water would be. So if you typed in, if you were in Manhattan, for instance, or Philadelphia, you type in the zip code, and then it will do a map to show what would be covered and how deep the water would be, which I thought was fascinating. It gave you a perspective.
Great one. You should put that on Facebook.
I'll put that on.
And it does give you perspective.
Yeah.
That's a good
Because
one.
all of a sudden you realize 4 feet of water covering a major city. And Houston's it's a major metropolis. It's a major city. As we got off that topic.
Anyway, to wrap up on passion projects and why making a business out of a passion may not be a smart thing, sit down and think about it if you're going to do it, and realize that the minute you call it a business enters into it, and that's accounting, and that's cash flow, that's everything that goes into it, and that may not be what you want to do.
No.
Anyway, thanks for joining us today. We want to thank John and Garrett and Allie, our fabulous team in the booth. Yay! They're all back from Labor Day, fresh as daisies. I don't know why.
Fresh as daisies?
I don't know where the daisy
It's very gay.
It is. I admit. That was very gay. I apologize.
When you told me I had a pretty coat when we were skiing, I could have killed you.
You ski off
a lift.
Tim comes off a ski lift. Say, Tim, that coat's so pretty.
It's a pretty coat. I said, that's not the look I was going for.
He wanted to ski right by me. Like, I don't know that.
Never wore it again.
You never. You never wore the coat again?
No boy wants to be in a pretty coat.
Okay, you want to be in a good-looking coat, not a.
So that's handsome coat, Tim.
That's a sharp coat.
Sharp coat.
Sharp coat.
It's pretty.
Thanks to Dr. Annie McKee for joining us. Her new book is How to Be Happy at Work. And a big, big thanks to our partner here, Deep Discount. Criterion sale in September. I can't say enough good things about the Criterion Collection. It is a really great way to watch a movie. They've been remastered. All of them are on the Blu-ray or DVD. So check out Deep Discount by going to focusgroupradio.com and click on their link. And finally, a big thank you to Volkswagen Group of America, our partner here for many, many years. We are driving the all-track wagon. Tim is dying to get into the new Tiguan. I've heard nothing but good things, by the way. And we're soon doing a road trip, I think, in the Atlas. We're going to check on that. So, everybody, don't text and drive. Stay alive.
Arrive alive.
Oh, darn it.
My goodness. How many years?
Garrett was looking right at me, too, because he knew I was
What
gonna
is it
fuck
again,
up.
Garrett?
Don't text and drive, arrive alive.
John.
Did you hear the tone?
John.
Like you should know.
No. John, now say it again.
Don't text and drive, arrive alive.
There you go.
If I do it the way Garrett did it, I'll remember it. And that's, yeah. Thanks, guys. See you next week.
It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Formerly on Sirius XM Satellite Radio and now accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.